It is an art, choosing gladiators. They're usually prisoners of war.
I claim this city for the glory of Rome.
You have something in you. Rage. Never let it go. It will carry you to greatness.
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's Reviews. On today's video, Ridley Scott is bringing another epic to cinema screens, and this time it's a sequel to one of his classics. So, pop on your sandals and grab your best sword, because it's time for Gladiator 2. Roughly 15 years have passed since the climactic events of the first Gladiator, with Maximus having ignited hope across Rome, slaying the treacherous Emperor Commodus, but regretfully losing his life in the process. But Rome is still yet to reach the prosperous levels that Maximus dreamed of, as the great city is now being ruled by tyrannical twin emperors, fascinated by war and violence. A new hope for Rome soon emerges when Lucius, now grown into a formidable warrior, is hell-bent on revenge against the Roman army and assumes the role of a gladiator to begin his quest for vengeance. There's no other way to say it. Ridley Scott's 2000 smash hit Gladiator is a cinematic triumph. Prior to seeing the sequel, I sat and rewatched the first Gladiator, and I soon realised that I hadn't actually watched this in well over a decade, and sitting back, letting this epic unfold in front of my eyes, I was reminded just how freaking good it is. Pure, bombastic filmmaking, taking the meaning of the word epic and running with it. I actually feel like if you took a census of most men my age and you asked them what their favourite films are, quite a significant proportion of them are going to say Gladiator, and considering that apparently we think about ancient Rome at least 3 times a week, I'm not surprised. Although I often think of the aqueduct system, it's very impressive. So when Ridley Scott announced that he was going to go back to the well for a Gladiator sequel, I'll admit, I was very nervous, because the Ridley Scott that we have now is not the same Ridley Scott from back then. His recent films have faltered with issues to do with pacing and focus. I mean, let's take a look at his most recent, Napoleon. Had gigantic spectacle, but also failed to encapsulate the essence of the feared general. So I was praying that Scott would at least honour and continue the legacy of the first film. So right off the bat, I want to say that Gladiator 2 does not hold a candle to that first film. It lacks an overall sense of emotional engagement. The screenplay isn't as tightly woven, and most disappointingly of all, that mythical ethos that was plastered all across the first film is nowhere to be seen here. But that isn't to say that Gladiator 2 is a bad film by any means. I happen to have a thoroughly enjoyable time watching this. There were shades of that Ridley Scott from ages past that just know that he's still in there. Without a shadow of a doubt, the most impressive aspect of Gladiator 2 are its spectacular action set pieces. Ridley Scott transports his audience squarely into the thick of it. Fantastic visual effects, impeccable sound design as the clashing and the clanging of swords ring out across your cinema speakers. Once we step foot inside the Colosseum, though, we are reminded of this structure's magnitude and barbarity, from charging rhinos to naval reenactments where they fill the Colosseum with water and deadly sharks. Gladiator 2 simply is an unmissable cinematic spectacle. Paul Mescal steps into blockbuster territory with, I'd say, moderate success. He's got a very strong presence and carries the anguish that fills Lucius very well. But as his character progresses and takes more of a commanding role, Mescal doesn't quite have the same sense of prowess that Russell Crowe carried with him in the first Gladiator. It also doesn't help Mescal that Lucius isn't exactly the most developed of characters, and especially into the latter half, there are sudden shifts in perspective that happen for the pure convenience of story, and ultimately that seemed to diminish his journey that up until that point he was embarking on. Pedro Pascal is comfortably in his wheelhouse in this sort of role as a conflicted general, and his eventual clash with Mescal's Lucius was fantastic to watch. Much of the action is brilliantly filmed. We get long, wide shots that show off just the scope and the fight choreography. I would even go so far as to say that I think the action in Gladiator 2 is better than the action in the first. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger star as the two nightmarish emperors. Their dynamic is very intriguing as both are wild, unpredictable cannons, but Quinn's emperor appears to be just a little bit more calculated than his brother. The best comparison that I can give is that they are very reminiscent of Joffrey from Game of Thrones, except just put him into two bodies and really dial in that just immense unpleasantness. But to no shock whatsoever, it is Denzel Washington who steals this entire movie. He plays a plotting and scheming senator, little fingering his way to the top, and Washington oozes coolness and psychological mastery effortlessly. No matter what, you are always aware that his character is moves ahead of everyone else, and it's captivating to see everything he's planned begin to fall into place. It might not be to everyone's liking, but for me, having Washington play the role not too dissimilar to how he would play a role in a modern day setting actually elevated the performance for me. It felt like this was a character who was almost ripped out of time and is operating leagues above everyone else. He's playing chess while all of the other characters aren't even playing checkers. They're stuck with snakes and ladders. I really wouldn't be too surprised if this is a performance that we look back on and we see Washington as a possible contender for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. But as dazzling as the spectacle is, and believe me, there are a number of sequences that I was riveted. The script of Gladiator 2, yeah, that needed a lot more finesse. As already mentioned, the character of Lucius starts out quite strong, but when the plot needs to position him in a certain way, his motives and sense of belief up until that very point almost dissipate. And again, through just pure convenience, he has to go down this route. It didn't feel like it was earned, and it actually felt like a betrayal of that character that we had been following up until that point. Gladiator 2 also doesn't have anywhere near the same breakneck pace of the first. This clocks in at just over 2.5 hours, and you really do feel that length. And to my disappointment, the score by Harry Gregson Williams is not even a patch on what Hans Zimmer did in the first film. I know that that was going to be nigh on impossible to match what Hans Zimmer did in the first Gladiator. The score for Gladiator, the first one, is one of my favourite film scores of all time. So the order was always going to be very tall. But for the score in the sequel, it never gave me that sense of propulsion, of iconography. And there are moments where there are themes from the first film that waft their way in, and I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't feel like they were warranted. There are elements of Gladiator 2 that I loved, and there are elements that I wasn't keen on. But as for my overall perspective, to answer Maximus, I was very much entertained. Purely on a spectacle level, Ridley Scott does not disappoint. Thrilling battles and gripping Colosseum clashes are perfect to experience on the biggest screen possible. But just as impressive is Denzel Washington, turning in one of his best performances in quite a while. Where Gladiator 2 falls down some notches, though, is when the dust settles and the script and dialogue take centre stage. Brilliant blockbuster entertainment, but knowing that the predecessor was that and a heck of a lot more, Gladiator 2 can't help but fall slightly short of that mark. Nevertheless, though, I'm going to give Gladiator 2 a 7.5 out of 10. Anyway, guys, those were my thoughts on Gladiator 2. Let me know. Have you had a chance to see the film yet? What did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, I would like to know, what do you think is the best swords and sandals epic? But that is all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button. And if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.